OK, Mark, thank you very much. Well, it is now day 4 of Russia's invasion, and still there's no sign of troops on the ground in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. But it is a very different situation, as we've heard, in Ukraine's second city. Former very senior soldier and co-chair of Universal Defence and Security Solutions, General Sir Richard Barons, is here with me now. So, General, let's talk about Kharkiv. Basically, the battle for the city is going on. That is not working. Let's just talk. Just talk me through Kharkiv, if you can.
When we woke this morning,
there we go.
We understood that Russian forces were fighting to get into Kharkiv. We know that the Russian 4th Tank Army had been in the area, and we initially saw that it was trying to bypass the city and avoid the fight to go into it. What we saw during the course of the early hours of this morning, and indeed from last night, were Russian forces trying to get into Kharkiv, but they were using only very light forces, essentially infantry and light armoured vehicles. And during the course of today, we've seen that that has been repulsed. So this is yet another indication that it is very difficult for light forces to penetrate Russian urban areas. And if you look on the next map,
it's coming. It's on its way.
It's on its way. So this is Kharkiv itself. Yeah. Now, the important point is it's about the size of Newcastle, home to about 1.4 million people. So it's a very large built-up area. And the choice the Russians confronted this morning was, if they can't get in there with light forces, should they use much heavier weapons? And so far there, they elected not to, either because they didn't have them or they wanted to try elsewhere.
Do we have any idea why they didn't? If it's a case of they didn't have them or they wanted to try elsewhere?
So we know the capability exists in the area, but it was not applied around Kharkiv. So I think that's an indication of the conundrum that they're facing.
OK, so that's Kharkiv, the second largest city. What's happening in Kiev today? So
over the course of Friday and Saturday and into today, we have seen Russian forces arrive, mostly from the northwest and northeast. But somewhat to our surprise, they appear to have poised, because we were wondering when Russian tanks would start to make their way closer into the city. That has not happened, and nor have we seen a lot of air activity from the Russian Air Force over the city itself. And I think we're seeing a number of indications here of the Russian operation has stumbled a bit. They're clearly an inexperienced force, so they're learning as they go. They have major logistic challenges supporting their forces, so they may just now be gathering their strength. They've had to revise the plans as they go. They don't appear to have total control of the air, which is, frankly, a bit of a surprise. And above all, not only have they encountered stiff and effective resistance from the Ukrainian military, they are bumping into an entire mobilized Ukrainian civil society that rejects their presence. And so the dilemma they are facing now, just like Kharkiv, is do they now try and isolate the city and essentially lay siege to it in a way that people have tried for hundreds of years in different settings, or are we going to see a major effort to bring great violence to Kiev with the heavy weapons that they have available to them? So it doesn't appear that they're going to get into that city without destroying a lot of it and killing a lot of civilians.
What sort of time frame are we looking at for them to make that decision?
Difficult to judge, but we imagine the forces that would be capable of doing this are now approaching the outskirts of the city, and they may be preparing to do exactly this.
OK, let's talk about the weaponry now that they have. What do they have in Ukraine at the moment?
So this is a very important point, because we are about to see tanks and artillery and infantry potentially engaged, but we're also starting to see equipment like this. This is a very large artillery gun. Indeed, it's the largest in the world. Its caliber is 203 millimeters. It fires a shell of about 110 kilograms out to about 37 kilometers. So this could hit indiscriminately anywhere in a city like Kiev. But it is also nuclear capable. It can fire a nuclear shell with a yield of up to the equivalent of 1,000 tons of TNT. And we know it also has a conventional warhead. We know this is very likely in and around Ukraine.
So what happens with this kind of a weapon? Does it come nuclear armed, or is it something that they then send out afterwards?
So generally speaking, it would normally travel with a small number of conventional, these 110-kilogram, very heavy, very destructive shells, the thing that can bring down an entire apartment block with one round. If nuclear weapons were deployed, they would travel separately, and there's a different procedure, and the range is considerably shorter, probably no more than about 18 kilometres, because it's a much heavier round.
Okay. So what else do they have?
So in this next photograph, this is a different kind of thing altogether. This is a rocket launcher that fires 30 of these missiles in 15 seconds out to a range of only about 6 kilometres. But these are thermobaric weapons. These produce a vapor cloud like napalm that produces a wall of flame when it's ignited, capable of devastating an area the size of an entire city block. We have seen these weapons moving in Ukraine. We have not seen them fired yet.
Okay. Do we know where they are in Ukraine?
No, we don't. We have imagery that we've seen them moving through built-up spaces. This comes on social media, but we don't know where they are.
Okay. Now, we've heard Vladimir Putin putting the nuclear deterrent on high alert. I mean, how worried are you about that, and what sort of weaponry would that be?
So the first thing that he might consider is a relatively small missile like this one on the next picture, which is the Iskander-class missile. This has a range of about 500 kilometres, and the nuclear warhead has a yield of between 5 and up to 50 kilotons, which is devastating enough.
How big? I mean, it doesn't really mean anything to me, that.
So, to destroy a city the size of Washington, you would need about 300 kilotons, okay. And this is up to 50 kilotons. So, we might call it a tactical missile rather than a theatre or intercontinental missile. It's the sort of nuclear device one might see if we were ever going down that crazy path deployed in Ukraine. And as Deborah Haynes has described, in Russian doctrine is the view that you could use a relatively small nuclear weapon to de-escalate a situation. And the Iskander missile might be an example of that. So with its range of 500 kilometres, this is the sort of thing you might see in Ukraine.
Are they in Ukraine or not?
We understand that they are.
Okay, okay. But they do have intercontinental missiles, don't they?
Yes, they do. So, as has been described today, where President Putin has talked about the nuclear option, he's really talking about this thing on the next picture. Completely different. This is a missile with the range to reach across the world, the sort of thing that would fly from Russia to the US or into the further reaches of Europe. The warhead on the end of this could be up to 800 kilotons. Russia has around 6,000 nuclear warheads. The US has slightly fewer, but there's an equivalence. So if we see this sort of thing, if this is what Mr. Putin is talking about, we're not talking about a threat to Ukraine, as we see on this next map. Suddenly, Ukraine has become a global issue where you could see the east coast of America, the west coast of America, much of Europe subject to nuclear attack. This seems to me so fanciful that surely Mr. Putin doesn't believe this, because if he does, you're then going to see the same sort of Western response on the major built-up areas in Russia. And we will be in that nuclear holocaust, which is essentially the end of civilization, on the back of a dispute over Ukraine. Surely that would be mad.
Mm-hmm. OK, we're not there yet. Let's go back to Ukraine. Just how much ground do the Russians have at the moment, and do we know